Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome, everyone. I am sure that many of you are currently practicing the art of balance right now, so appreciate you taking the time to join us today. My name is Maren Sakri. I run demand generation for Evolv Technologies. And after Shop Talk was postponed, I got on the wire and tried to track down a few digital leaders that were willing to jump on and chat with us about some of the biggest challenges that retailers are facing today. This is an unprecedented time for retailers. Wall Street Journal just reported dozens of companies are looking to hire nearly 500,000 people in the next coming weeks. The shift has happened fast, and now more than ever, digital retailers are we're dependent on digital retailers. So it's a great time, a challenging time, and a lot of emotion for everyone. So thank you everyone for joining. If you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to put those in the Q&A area at the bottom. We'll answer those questions at the end. We will also have a recording distributed at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panelists. Our first panelist, Janie Yu, is a partner at Fung Capital, a venture capitalist firm focused on early to growth stage technology startups in e-commerce, enablement, supply chain, and logistics. Some of the companies including Select, Flow, Tulip Retail, Third Channel, Centric, Navar, Hook Logic, and more. Prior to joining Fung Capital, Janie was with Burt's Bees. Thanks for joining us, Janie.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Matt Blonder is the VP of Marketing and DBC at Reebok. He oversees Reebok's global marketing and digital strategy, as well as the e-com business. Since joining the brand in 2017, Matt has built a framework of sustainable growth and delivered significant impact. Some of his accomplishments include the overhaul of Reebok's digital consumer experience and complete redesign of Reebok.com, as well as the launch of Reebok's first loyalty program, Reebok Unlocked. As a result of this consumer-driven focus, the U.S. digital business has achieved consecutive high double-digit growth. Thanks for joining us, Matt.
Thanks for having me.
Bernadine Wu is the founder and CEO of Fit for Commerce, a business which resulted from her many years of operational strategic success in helping online retailers develop digital strategies and grow e-commerce businesses. She's a frequent speaker and writer for the e-commerce industry's leading resources, including Internet Retailer, NRF, Shop.org, Shop Talk, and more. Some of Bernadine's most recent work includes Barnes & Noble, Bed Bath & Beyond, Victoria's Secret, just to name a few. Welcome, Bernadine. And completing our panel of digitals, we also have with us Michael Scharf. He is the CEO of Evolv. Michael brings over 2 decades of digital commerce and retail experience with leadership roles at some of the most well-known retailers in North America, including Sears Canada, Toys R Us, Staples, and Best Buy. Thanks for joining us, Michael.
My pleasure, and thanks to Matt, Janie, and Bernadine for being here with us today.
Absolutely. So I'm going to stop my screen share here so everyone can see the panelists. All right, so we're going to jump right into the panel questions. Of course, top of mind is COVID right now, and all of the retailers as well as everyone globally is just dealing with the challenges, the quick challenges that companies have had to be extremely nimble and agile with. So I want to kick off this topic since I know it resonates with everyone across the globe right now. So I'll start with Michael. What are some changes you have already seen companies make to help customers?
Yeah, so maybe before I talk about customers, one of the things that's been really encouraging for me in general is to see how the business community has stepped up and really thought about how do they help their employees. And, you know, I've seen a lot of companies, not just here, but around the world, really take extraordinary efforts to try to make sure all of their employees are healthy and safe. In the Bay Area, there were a lot of companies very early on before any government mandates that migrated to work from home, including Evolv, and started to create safe environments to try to limit community spread. And people now doing things like, you know, converting factories. Elon Musk just delivered 1,000 ventilators to California, and 3M and others like GM are really stepping up to, you know, to help the country. So super proud to see all the work that the companies in America are doing, and around the world to try to help fight this virus. In terms of the things that companies are doing to help customers, it's really interesting for those of us in the digital commerce business. There's a lot of things that we've been working on for many, many years that I think all of a sudden have become some of the most important things that retailers are doing. Things like, rapid delivery, same-day delivery. We've seen a huge uptick in curbside delivery, which is something, early on, I think people thought was kind of silly. If you're going to drive to the store, why can't you just go the extra few feet to get in? But virtually every restaurant in my town is now doing curbside. Best Buy announced 2 days ago they're physically closing their stores, but they're doing curbside. Walmart and Amazon have really ramped up their delivery networks in a pretty incredible way, considering how fast this hit. So figuring out how to serve the customers in a healthy and safe way. Almost everywhere I go, I see customers being served by people wearing gloves or masks. So that has been a tremendous help, I think, to ensure safety and also make sure commerce can still happen in a meaningful way.
Yeah, I think even in the curbside pickup, there's now trunk delivery, right, where you just pop your trunk and you put the food or the delivery in there, and you don't even touch the customer or even roll the window down. I'd agree with you, Michael. There's just amazing things going on. There's nothing like something like this that brings out the best in people. I would say that there's sort of like a front-facing and a behind-the-scenes way of answering the question. There are like Walmart, Target, some of the large ones. Obviously, they've amped up their inventory for some products, but they're also talking about loaning space for test centers, their drive-throughs. We saw yesterday LVMH, who had ordered and paid for masks for distribution in France, and now they've actually shifted their perfume production into hand sanitizers. So I think everybody's getting really creative, and literally the creativity is happening day by day. Like all of a sudden, all these stores were open from 6 to 7:30 in the morning to accommodate 60 and older. Telephone companies and our mobile companies are offering unlimited data, and the list goes on. And so, we will look back at this and we'll see some amazing innovation. Behind the scenes, I think there's a lot of mechanics that have to happen. I'm sure there's a lot of brands and retailers who are saying, and hopefully giving a pat on the back to the chief digital officer, probably, who got Focus and Ropus and in-store pickup online in the last year or two. We've had many of our clients say, especially brands and retailers and B2B, say, damn, I wish that I had gotten that, that sorted out. So behind the scenes, those kinds of mechanics, moving inventory, grouping products, of course, changing, the website mechanics and so on.
So Bernadine, oh, sorry, go ahead, Janie.
I was thinking, I think the key word here is really nimble, right? Consumers, ourselves included here, right now it's all about survival. We have to survive the next 4, 8, 10 weeks, who knows how long it's going to be. So we change our behaviors very quickly because we have to survive. We have to worry about our safety and health. As a result, the more nimble retailers and brands who are able to really change the way they engage with their consumers on the front end, moving from physical retail into digital retail, the speed, the nimble mentality is key. Now, you have to be also very nimble and flexible on the supply chain as well, right? You are able to change the front end fairly easily, but how do you organize the supply chain to deliver the consumer demand? And that is something I think the leaders who nobody predicted that COVID is going to happen, right? But when they were thinking about how do we organize our supply chain using data, using technology, so we're able to serve the needs of our consumers as their behaviors change. Now, COVID really happened, and that changed the consumer behaviors. The leaders like Walmart, like Target, like Amazon, who are able to really organize their supply chain in a very nimble way, are able to really win in this war against COVID-19, right? the retailers who don't necessarily have the nimble mindset or the flexible supply chain or using data and technology to enable that, they might not be able to survive this. You know, one that actually really came to mind is Trader Joe's. We all love Trader Joe's in the Bay Area, right? And maybe in the East Coast as well. But, you know, Trader Joe's doesn't deliver, right? And now you're losing customers. By the time we get out of COVID-19, will Trader Joe's be relevant? We don't know.
Mm.
You know,
that's a really good point,
Janie, is a lot of changes are happening right now. And the question for me is, which changes will persist and which changes will revert after this current crisis is over? So we think about things like the opening up and increasing of data. We think about things like the changing over of production lines in order to support different lines of business, et cetera. Some of these things, my hope, is will persist, and that we won't go back to the previous normal, but we'll find ourselves in a new normal that actually opens up access, opens up opportunity, opens up, you know, whether it's something as simple as bandwidth, but opens these things up to the consumer such that this moment can turn transformative beyond just the dealing with the crisis, but in our day-to-day. So I'm incredibly excited to see how some of these changes persist over the course of time.
I think that's a great point, Matt. And, you know, we've seen, you know, over the last decade or so, a pretty big shift in terms of how customers engage with brands from a digital experience standpoint, as well as how things like remote work has started to really take hold with the advent of high-speed internet and video conferencing and, you know, more nimble workforces. And I think what we're experiencing is a dramatic acceleration of those trends that were already happening. And I think there's no reason to expect that we're going to revert back to norm. We will revert to something probably in between the two, but I think this will show people that the trends that we've been seeing have a lot of benefit for society, for individuals, and I think they will continue to take hold, you know, in the future. So it's a great point.
So Matt, I want to ask you, you know, how has the coronavirus outbreak changed how your company is prioritizing investments? Is it forcing you to rethink your go-to-market approach?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're a brand and a company that has multiple arms of business or multiple tracks of business, whether it's our wholesale partners, whether it's our own stores, whether it's our own digital storefront, et cetera. There are so many different ways that we interact, and there are things that we can control and there are things that we can't control. And I think this moment is helping us to understand and clarify how we depend upon each of these channels and how we support each of these channels in the best way possible. So, you know, right now, of course, there's an overinvestment in everyone in our space, in our own .com, because it is a space we can manage and it's a destiny we can control. But it doesn't lessen the importance of, you know, many of our wholesale partners. It certainly doesn't lessen the importance in the, you know, in the long term of our physical retail presence. So there's a lot of thinking going on. There's a lot of immediate reactionary behavior going on to make sure we're serving our consumers and that we are creating great business continuity. And then I think for us, there's also a lot of discussion both internally and externally about how do we better support each other, right, as a community through these moments, and ensure that it's not every man for himself, but we're in fact acting responsibly in the in the entire ecosystem. Our investments right now are all about how do we meet our consumers where they can actually be met. And that's from a product sales perspective, but also from a content perspective, and from a providing levity and providing movement and providing social connectivity in a time where that's more difficult. So there's a ton of resource shift within our own ecosystem against all of these moments. And, I think to the previous conversation, some of those things won't change, right? Some of these shifts will in fact persist. They are things that we probably were intending to do that now we have more reason to do it, or more bandwidth to do it. But there's probably no facet of our operation that won't be touched by this moment and where we won't see a redeployment or different deployment of our resources.
One thing you mentioned, and I keep seeing this in a lot of email marketing, is just empathy. And empathy goes a long way right now, and it presents an incredible opportunity for those brands that can get out ahead of it and show their customers that they truly care. And it is that personalizing in between the company and the families and the people, to just let them know, hey, we're here for you. So I think those brands that can find that balance of, you know, same day shipping, we'll deliver to your trunk, whatever it might be, but doing it in a way that's, you know, that empathy piece goes a long way. Bernadine?
We're closing down, but we care. You know, we're temporarily shutting, but we care. Even if it's, you know, as long as it's authentic, you know, there is something to just saying, you know what, we're not going to add to the delivery network that is already overtaxed. We're not going to, you know, add to the interweb that's being, you know, overtaxed. I mean, you know, as we talked about this thought before today's call, one way of thinking about the investment plan or strategy is in possibly 3 different phases or buckets. I would describe right now, you know, the current, like this past week or two, the next, whatever, 2 to 3 to 4 weeks as sort of there's a little bit of a freeze, right? There's a little bit of let's just bear down. Let's make sure our families and our employees are safe. Let's, you know, think about what we can do in this sort of like first phase. But then I think we do need to start thinking about that recovery phase or recovery planning phase. Once we can get our heads around today, I do think that brands and retailers and companies, including my own, you know, we need to think about like, what do I need to do now to plan for recovery, and what do I need to do to get in place? And for some of those brands and retailers, it may be, whoops, we should have doubled down on digital before. We better triple down on digital now, or cross-channel or omnichannel. And then maybe there's a third phase that is finally, you know, we are over that curve, and there's sort of a post or regrowth or a, you know, phoenix rising from the ashes or something like that. And I don't know, maybe there's a 4th phase, but I think it's worth a framework where, you know, we are intentional about these different phases and we get our teams together thinking this way. You know, we think about our supply chain that way. We think about our marketing in that way, and so on.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, right? Because a lot of folks in the industry are in survival mode. And that is, you know, it's very much like Maslow's, you know, hierarchy of needs, right? It's about the basics for a lot of people today. It's food and shelter. And we can't think about, you know, love and acceptance. But there's going to come a point where we do make it through this, and we have to ensure that we not pulled the rug out from under our own feet, and that we are thinking about the today and the basic needs, but continuing to, where appropriate, thoughtfully funding the future needs. So when we do come through it, because we will, when we do, you know, you don't find yourself in that, oh man, what did I do, right?
So, you know, as a VC who invests in businesses, right? I primarily invest in technology businesses, but who actually, you know, service retailers and brands. And obviously, we all think about, you know, investments in the current time, in the crisis right now. Frankly, you know, if you sit in the boardroom right now, it is not necessarily, I'm talking about the, you know, the short-term investment mindset. It is not so much about now, how do we invest? Now it's how do we conserve cash? Cash is king in a crisis moment like this. And frankly, we don't know how long this is going to last. Is it 6 months, 12, or 18? Right? And from a planning purpose, you know, this is how I advise my portfolio companies as well. We have to be very conservative. We have to think about this is likely to be a 12 to 18 months crisis. Now, how do we make sure we have enough cash to survive the next 12 to 18 months? To Matt's point, right now, it is more about survival, right? Now, but hopefully we are able to, some of us were able to survive this. And then what do we do? Now we also have to think about the second phase, which is, you know, to Bernadine's point, is the recovery phase. You know, some of the retailers I spoke to in the last couple of weeks are actually thinking about how do we, in the short term, in the crisis, in phase 1, during the crisis, we have to survive. We might not, some companies might not have cash to last for 12 months, right? So how do we generate some cash so we have a chance to survive this pandemic? Some companies are actually very creative. Some of the smaller, medium-sized direct-to-consumer brands are actually thinking, now, if you think about coronavirus pandemic right now, it's sort of started in China expand to the rest of Asia, and now it's moving to, you know, it's here in North America, it's in Europe. However, in this moment, Asia is actually recovering, right? The Asian consumers are coming back to somewhat of a normal life. They will consume a bit more. Whereas in the United States right now, for all of us, we're just buying food and cleaning supplies and medical supplies. I'm not buying a pair of shoes. I'm not buying, you know, a $2,000 handbag at this moment, right? So how do we shift our branding, our supply chain, so we can better service customers in Asia? And maybe when Italy recovers, then we're able to better service the customers there, and then US recovers, we're able to service the customers here. So some companies are actually thinking about how do we actually use technology so we can actually deliver products and experience and content from the US, if the headquarters is here, to customers in Asia, in China at the moment. Right? One way they can do it is using technology platforms, and I'm totally biased here because I do have a portfolio company in that space, Flow Commerce. You know, you're able to use technology to facilitate a shipment of a pair of Reebok shoes from Boston directly to Shanghai, right? How do you use a local partner in China so you're able to actually deliver, you know, actually generate some sales and deliver a meaningful customer experience there in that market? How do you use, you know, wholesale digital platforms so you're able to actually open up more connections and more doors in China, in markets that are recovering right now? So that is something that we can think about, even though we're now in survival mode.
Yeah, I think that bifurcation of the intention is really important, and realizing that every geographic location is at a different place in this kind of evolution, and not taking a one-size-fits-all approach. Doing so, you'll inevitably miss an opportunity and likely create issue. And so we've got to be very, very intentional in how we think about each geography, each consumer type, each moment, you know, thoughtfully, logically, and with an arc in mind, because this is ever changing.
Yeah, this is actually really the time to think. I know this is cliche, but it's true now. It's more true than ever. This is the time to think global, but act local. For governments, for brands, big or small. You know, it doesn't matter if you're Reebok, a global brand, or you're a small brand out of LA, you have to think global as well.
Yeah, and the key to underline all that is how do you communicate with your clients and your customers, and how do you keep lines of communication open and be transparent and make sure people know what to expect. So there's a lot of stress in the world today, and making sure people aren't surprised is really critical to trying to help calm people down, even if things aren't going to happen exactly as they would like. The more communication, the better, and the clearer the communication, the better.
On that note, I had a question. So, you know, it's interesting because we are having to shift our priorities so quickly. I'm sure that now more than ever, the blockers in the organization or some of those obstacles are much larger than they were previously, or more noticeable. So Matt, I wanted to ask you, what are some of those priorities that you're focused on right now, where you're seeing some blockers thinking, we've got to fix this, we got to get out of this, in successfully implementing, whether it's a technology component, something else that you're working on? Can you provide an example?
You know, I think we're kind of in the opposite space, which is we're looking at this as an opportunity to dramatically transform the way we think about our business and the way we run the business, the way we collaborate, the way we focus, et cetera. You know, I think historically one of the biggest blockers, which I'm sure is no different for any other established company, you know, one of the biggest blockers is inertia, right? Or muscle memory. We have a way we've always done things. We have, you know, we have decisions that have been put into place. We've got ways of working that are very comfortable and nice and clean. And, you know, it's hard to move from a place of comfort to a place of discomfort. It's hard to move from a place where you've got things very smooth and orderly and clean to a place where maybe they're more messy, you know, less organized, et cetera. And for us, this is really an opportunity to say all bets are off. Right? There are things that we've wanted to do for quite some time, but we haven't wanted to disrupt the organization or disrupt certain pockets within the organization. and for good reason. But this really is an opportunity where we no longer have that muscle memory blocker. We no longer have the organizational inertia. We no longer have the historical things that have held us back, and we can now leap forward. And so, we're really running towards this as a meaningful opportunity to shift. And whether it's resources, we have a lot of discussions about where do we have high potential, high performing team members who are ready for the next and really hungry for the next, and can we redeploy towards this, kind of the current state, but our future ambitions. From a technology perspective, it's very, very clear, as Bernardine noted, right? Like, there are decisions that if we'd known about today, a year ago, we would have made differently. Well, we didn't, and that's okay, but now we know. And so the question is, what are we doing with it? So there are a lot of areas where we're doubling down, we're tripling down, we're accelerating a lot of our things that we were doing thoughtfully and not slowly, but in a measured way. And we're saying, forget that. It's not about measure at the moment, it's about speed. So, it's funny for us, it is organizational wide. There's really no area where we're not focused on taking this opportunity to kind of break down the scar tissue and, overcome some of the inertia in every single aspect.
Yeah, I would even say that if before coronavirus, if you were not in digital transformation, you're behind.
Yeah.
Right? And Matt, I've known you over at least 3 jobs. Every one of those jobs was leading digital transformation. So, those that weren't, are already behind, and now with this, obviously, extra pressure. And I love what you said about, the sort of organizational people and, aspect of things. I would add data on top of this. That, and I know, we always talk about data and big data and data lakes and so on. But I think data couldn't be even more important. Everything that we're talking about doing, and I mean enterprise data, right? Not just customer data, but all the way from what we say is sort of idea to doorstep, all the way through supply chain, all the way through merchandising and how we romance what we're selling, whether we're selling Reebok sneakers or PVC piping. All the way through to our customer, marketing and the customer experience and multiple channels and so on, and order management and fulfillment and whatever. And I'm sure there's like 60 other steps, in between. But data couldn't be more important. It's the number one question we're asked right now. How do I? It's no longer how do I collect data. Actually, it's what do I do with all this data that I have. And how do I make it into actionable insights? And one we always say also is that it's not black and white. You're not doing it one day and then you're going to solve it and figure it out. Like it's kind of like that. How do you eat an elephant? Like one chunk at a time. And that's what we've got to do. So if you don't have a data team, a data czar, or somebody who's focused on data and how to leverage it for growth, for operational effectiveness, now's the time to appoint someone, create a team, ring fence that, or create a little budget for it, and also to Matt's point, change the culture so that we value data skills and talent. And everybody has a data job, everybody.
And traditionally, just to follow up on that point, traditionally, it has been really hard for retailers and brands to hire data scientists, right? Because, tier 1 data scientists are not going to work at a retail company, right? They get paid much more at Facebook and Google, and they're doing much bigger projects. Now, this crisis actually has created opportunities in terms of talent pool for retailers. Unfortunately, for many tech companies, especially startups, some people will lose jobs. Some startups won't be able to survive this. And there will be much more availability of talent, which is the right time for retailers to actually think about building their data team, data capabilities in-house. I have been investing in retail tech companies for the last decade. The biggest challenge, I invest in enterprise technology. The biggest challenge for these startups who are selling software into enterprises is data integration. they all have data, but their data is all siloed. Or there are multiple teams within the organization who own the data, right? So to go through the organizational bureaucracy to get all the data together, to clean the data, to feed into just one application, for example, email marketing, which is quite simple, it can take 6 to 9 months just to get the data ready. And now, frankly, nobody has the time. If you're not data ready, you won't be able to survive this, because we will not. You have to spend, if you are not going to be ready from a data point of view within 6 months, you have to burn cash for 6 months for nothing.
But
And if you have
home wondering what to do with their time, you know, maybe become a self-taught data scientist.
That's right, yeah.
Data scientists are, I don't think everybody needs to be or hire a data scientist. Of course, that's the idyllic, you know, job description. But I think everyone in their role can think about and can figure out how to use data better, or how to learn to be more analytical. And so, you know, maybe let's use this time towards that.
I think this is a time, though, that we have a call to action, right? It's incumbent upon us to be smarter, to be more efficient, to be more data-driven and data-led. And whether it's at the data science level or whether it's the simple, you know, basic and analytical level, right? We can all do better. And the better we do, the better we can conserve our cash, the better we can serve our consumers, the better we can optimize our supply chain or our infrastructure, et cetera. And so I think your point's very well taken, Bernardine, which is it doesn't have to be at the apex level. It can be at all levels, and they're all very, very meaningful contributors to continued success and continuity.
So jumping in a little bit more to the silos conversation and opening the gates on collaboration, you know, I'll start with Michael on this one. Collaboration is the key to sustaining a great corporate culture. So how are you ensuring your employees are as collaborative as possible? And I know there's changes now than a month ago, but
Sure.
What does that look like?
Yeah, well, for us, you know, we're a pretty young company. So when we launched the company, we took a very focused approach on culture and collaboration. And two of the things that were most important for me as we were building the team was a orientation around customers and making sure everybody we hired throughout the company, regardless of the role, understood that, you know, we have a role in serving customers and everybody touches our customers. And then two, the need to have a very collaborative environment across the entire organization and for everybody to be there to support each other. And, you know, we've, since launching, you know, really tried to take use of all of the technology tools that are out there, because we have a relatively distributed team with people all around the US and then in several other countries. So for a small team, we had to be, you know, kind of forward leaning on technology. We've made extensive use of Zoom, as I think everybody else is learning how to do now, and many companies have for a while. We've had extensive use of things like Slack and Confluence and other digital tools that allow for, you know, great communication. And then, you know, through the last month or so, because of the situation we're in where everybody is now working remote, we've started doing a number of things to allow the team to stay really engaged on a daily basis. So we do monthly morning coffee talks every day where the executives just have an open house where any employees can drop in and chit chat. And it's a great way to start the day. We do that at 8:30 every day. All of the working teams have created open time work environments where the teams are just gathering basically water cooler talk, you know, for people to share out what they're working on. And then we're doing weekly, you know, after work happy hours virtually. So I actually think through this, it's given the team a lot of opportunity to find time, ironically, to learn more about each other as individuals, because we're all at our homes. So we're seeing people's kids come in and their spouses and their pets. And, you know, we're talking about our lives more often than we do at work, where we're pretty focused all day. So I think in the end, this, you know, it's a painful time, but I think it's going to allow us to be a tighter knit team when we come out of it, because we're being forced to think a lot more diligently about how we engage, how we collaborate, you know, how we support each other remotely. You know, much like we talked about earlier, there are shifts taking place that I think are going to be permanent shifts in how we think as people and as employees and coworkers.
You know, this is interesting. There are different types of leadership styles, right? You've got the Steve Jobs style, which is lead with fear. And you've got the other type of style, which is lead with empathy. I think in this environment, you've got to lead with empathy. You've got to really sincerely care about your team and care about their life, their safety, their health, and secondarily business. But, you know, safety first. Once the employees feel like they're looked after, they're cared about, they will find creative ways to get the job done. You know, sometimes might not be during the typical work hours, could be after putting kids to bed, right? You hop on email, you hop on a call with your colleagues. But, you know, being a leader right now, this is also typical, you know, we talk about a lot with our portfolio companies. This is the time to lead with care, with empathy.
I think the one important caveat to that is, not caveat, but watch out is it has to be authentic and consistent.
That's right.
To switch from, to use that dichotomy from fear to empathy on a dime is relatively transparent and seems transactional. You know, there's an end to that means. And so the question for me would be, you know, how do you lead, you know, in a way consistently that allows for moments like these? And then when we move into a different moment, you don't change your leadership style. In theory, you don't change your leadership style, right? You continue to lead in a way that's authentic, but helps us to weather these storms. And, you know, I think that's where we see the most success is those leaders who are consistently empathetic. There's an authenticity to the empathy. And it feels much, much better than those folks for whom it's a little bit more transparent that this is a transaction and an active decision as opposed to a way of being.
We have always been a virtual company because we always go to our clients' sites. So there hasn't really been a transition for us in terms of going virtual. But a couple of things that we've learned. So we've always had a daily huddle. Weekly go to meeting or Zoom calls. We've actually asked people to turn their cameras on because we were getting a little lazy with, not having the camera on. And there is something really nice about seeing someone's room, or like you said, there are kids coming by, or their dog, or their bird, or whatever. So that's important too. We have a weekly call where we share learnings. And those learnings could be about anything, something going on in the industry, something I learned from a client project, something I've seen, something that is like a great iPhone tip. Those are always great. And that's a way of keeping up to date with the market. And what we've done is we've given space to talk about coronavirus, and then we've given space to continue talking about clients and industry stuff. And we're pretty distinct about those so that, one doesn't chew up too much of the other, but we really give it, like you said, authentic space to talk about because it's on people's minds.
Interestingly, this has nothing to do with Corona. At Adidas, we have our leadership framework is broken into 3 pillars: confidence, creativity, and then collaboration. So we've said as an organization that one of the top 3 elements of leadership success, and that's at the leadership level and at the entry level, is that we collaborate, right? We're better together. And so everything we do is done with the lens or through the lens of collaboration. And so, we've actually, over the course of the last couple of months, completely reorganized our brand against a more collaborative setup. So we're taking agile principles. It's certainly not an agile culture because footwear design and development is a long lead time game, and it can't be done in small sprints. But we're bringing cross-functional teams together. We're sitting them, or prior to the current moment, sitting them physically together, empowering them within a framework to make decisions collaboratively and to move fast with leadership support. And so everything that we're doing right now is how do we get more collaborative? How do we make sure that we're enabling and engaging our team members to be more in it together consistently, as opposed to what historically in product development is very much a kind of a handoff approach, right? Person A does his or her or their component and moves it to person B, who moves it to person C and D. And we're moving from that framework to one where it's about an ecosystem that collaboratively ideates, designs, and works together with the intention of being A, faster, and B, having a far better product at the end of the process, if you will. So for us, it's a matter of our company intention and then iterative behavior to get there where we see opportunity, but consistently.
in that construct, how is there a way that you guys have thought about how to handle either breakdowns, conflict, failures, breakpoints? You know, like that collaboration process often sounds great, but then in practice, you know, stuff breaks down, right? Is there
Yeah, so for us, I have to give our head of strategy an unbelievable amount of credit. She's done an incredible job of setting the framework and educating and re-educating and three-educating, if that's a word. I don't know if it is, but I just made it up. To make sure that we are in fact addressing those issues and not letting them fester and turn into something much, much, much larger. So as a leadership team, we're looking at our process on a weekly basis and saying, okay, what's working, what's not working, what do we need to address individually, what do we need to address as an organization, and you know, how do we move forward quickly, but also with care. And a lot of it is really anchored to transparency and a commitment as a leadership team to running towards the problem. You know, don't sweep it under the rug. Don't pretend that it's going to go away, you know, by virtue of its, you know, its own energy to go away. Like, we've got to drive it away and create solutions. But it takes intention, it takes attention, and it takes consistency, because you think it's a one and done, and it's rarely anything close.
So I'm going to pivot our discussion slightly over to technology. Janie, I'll kick this off with you. What are some unique and different technologies you've seen retailers start to use that have made the buying experience more seamless?
You know, there are a lot of different technologies available today to drive better experience digitally for customers, right? So I think that's the opportunity that we all have today, that there are all types of technologies available. You know, the way I typically think about a better customer experience, I think about in twofold. One is, if you think about the fundamental of retail, you're selling something, right? And oftentimes you're selling a product. So how do you use data and technology so you can deliver the right product to the consumers at the right time, the right place, at the right price point, right? And all of these can be today enabled by data and by technology. So that is, you know, we think about technologies on the back end, and, you know, the example I often use is the Select example, which was a company I invested in a few years ago, which was acquired by Nike a year ago. It is all about using data and using technology and using AI, so you're able to really optimize and predict the assortment and the SKU level, the inventory level, based on number of SKUs and based on number of locations. Now, good thing is that, you know, the technology's application was primarily for the physical stores. Now, all Nike stores are shut, obviously, right? But how do you actually move the technology to, you know, other locations like warehouses and micro fulfillment nodes? And those are actually, the technology and data is absolutely available today. So I think retailers definitely have to think about to use data and technology to optimize their supply chain so they can deliver the right products to the consumers at the right time, right? So that's one point. The second point really is the front end of consumer experience. And there are multiple, you know, facets, right? There's, you know, the one touch point is email marketing, obviously, and the one touch point is the actual website, the mobile experience, and there are multiple touch points with consumers digitally. How do you optimize all the different touch points? Now, of course, there are, you can use AI to predict what is the right content to deliver, right? But, you know, we all know prediction is only as good as the data and the algorithm. So this is actually, yeah, and I say this really very sincerely, I really do believe Evolv is providing a very interesting technology to optimize that experience, right? It is all about using a technology platform so you can test multiple ideas at scale simultaneously, right? So you're able to test the content, you're able to test the price point, you're able to test the actual customer journey, the different touch points along this journey for this particular customer, right? So I think there are many different tools available to retailers today. I actually don't think that is today is a bottleneck. I think the bottleneck is the mentality and is the speed to change organizationally. So as a leadership team, as a business team, you're able to really leverage all the different technology tools that are available. They might not be 100%, right? They might not be able to be, 100% helpful, but they can get you to 90%, 95%, which is way better than having no tools at all. So I think the key right now for a lot of leaders who haven't really implemented a technology, a digital transformation process right now, this is the time. If they don't do it, they won't survive.
Yeah, I think, Janie, your point's a really good one. It's not, the tech is there, right? And has been there for some time, and it's getting better every day.
And some is better. Some might be 90%, some might be, 95%, right?
Yeah, that's not the rate limiting step. The rate limiting step is the organizational metabolism and setup for creating a culture of fast failure, a culture of experimentation, and maybe it's logical and thoughtful experimentation and informed experimentation, but experimentation without impunity. And I think that's where a lot of organizations get hung up, is they have a hard time with the notion of not knowing, because we're human and we're ego driven, and there's also a natural fear of making a mistake. And rather than embracing the mistake, because a mistake is simply just another data point that makes us better, but rather than embracing that mistake, they let it paralyze them. And so I think the biggest rate limiter right now is, do you have a corporate culture and a setup that allows for fast failure, for experimentation, for retribution-free mistake making, et cetera. And that's where folks need to really focus their energies if they want to be successful in the experimentation space.
Yeah, and I think if you look at very successful retailers or brands, most of them have a built-in culture of experimentation and learning, and they understand that not every project you launch is going to be successful, and you're not going to measure everything based upon a cost of capital ROI that you need to achieve to make an investment. And you have to try hundreds or thousands of things all the time, knowing, like VCs do, that many of your experiments are going to fail, but the ones that win are going to have a meaningful impact to really shift your business in a way that's going to matter and make you better and different.
Yeah. We do a lot of P&L reviews, like nothing like looking under the skirt, right? And that's where the rubber hits the road. And sometimes we'll make the CFO fall out of his chair because we're recommending a 5% failure.
Yeah.
Right? Now, the CMO loves that, gets that, because a large part of marketing is experimentation, right? The digital officer or the head of e-commerce, same thing. They've got to always be trying things on, testing things within the digital or omnichannel environment. But to actually put a number out there, whether it's 5%, 2%, 10%, that's a pretty bold move. But at least it puts a target out there so that it makes it a real conversation, right? About what's going to go in there and what isn't it, and maybe that sometimes pushes the culture change that you guys have been talking about.
The culture for experimentation oftentimes is led from top down, right? The CEO has the appetite for change, for experimentation, then the management team will execute on that strategy. I also think this is the time to actually enable the appetite for experimentation from the bottom up.
Absolutely.
Giving the employees, at the warehouse level, at the desk level, to be able to actually do some small experimentation. Let's test the blue button versus the yellow versus green, right? In the past, it's like, I have to make a decision. If I don't make the right decision, maybe my job is on the line, right? Yeah. Now, there are tools and technologies and data available, so you can, run a bunch of micro experimentation like that at the bottom, at the entry level of the company, right? And that culture will start, will actually move up the pyramid and get to the C-suite, get to the CEO level. I think at that point, hopefully, the CFO will jump out of the chair less often than getting a big number from the CEO, and then the CFO has to go execute on that.
We have something called the Innovation Office that we run, where we curate innovations for brands, retailers, and grocery and our clients. And innovation now, right, could be widgets, or it could be, you know, small, medium-sized tools, or it could be enterprise level innovation, of course. And one thing that we've also found is that there is this sort of, and I'm going to use an old term, middleware, right, where the ability to try on an innovation can be, you know, it can be really complex, or it can be much simpler. And of course, the goal is to make it more simple and more plug and play. And so, to your point, Jamie, there are tools out there, there's technology, there's different architecture out there that can help a company implement and try on an innovation and turn it off just as quickly. There's a whole, you know, legal aspect to it. So instead of having to sign a 3-year, and who wants to sign a 3-year agreement with a startup, right? There are ways of doing that, and we actually have a legal platform for doing that within the innovation office. So where there's a will, there's a way. But I think the world has changed, and we don't have to think about, you know, changes to our checkout. Used to be things that we labored over, that went through a whole, you know, steering committee and a whole investment plan, and it took a year to make a change to, you know, your checkout or to your, you know, your main customer journey. And I'm imagining that it's, you know, there are faster ways of doing it, and that there are tools to help us test in and out quickly.
On that note, continuing on this experimentation conversation, so Bernadine, tell me a little bit about how you're seeing organizations measure experimentation success and the impact it has on customer experience.
Well, I think first off, we would highly recommend that brands and retailers, I'm just using the word retailers kind of broadly, but anybody selling anything online, right, or in an omnichannel environment, you've got to first understand the customer journey. So we are seeing a lot more thought towards mapping out those, you know, whether you guys call them personas or use cases or customer journeys, so that you really understand what is our customer trying to accomplish, what is the journey that they want to take or could take, and how are we really supporting her, or you know, or creating friction. So that's the first. That's mapping it out. Then I think it's literally breaking down each step of the way, each component, each you know, people, process, technology that's needed in order to enable a seamless, frictionless customer experience. I think we all know what the Holy Grail is. I think where we see struggle is in the steps to get there. You know, the sort of mojo and muscle that it's going to take to do the work, to get the investment, to maybe even make investments that are behind the scenes, like we talked about before, that are not necessarily seen in the customer, you know, immediately, but you got to get all this like foundation stuff in place. I mean, we're seeing more POS changes, ERP changes, where, you know, all like those ugly old kind of systems that nobody wanted to touch. We're seeing more of those being readdressed now, so that we can unlock a lot of the front end, you know, and more digitally client-facing types of tools that then support the customer journey.
Great. So I'd like to, we've got about 6 minutes left, so I want to open it up to a few of the questions. All right, let me go through these. So Michael, I'm going to punt this over to you. What's the biggest recent trend you've seen emerging in retail?
Biggest recent trend, wow.
Other than coronavirus.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, there's a couple of them that have been going on for a while. I mean, I think the acceleration of flexible delivery options, I think, has been a really exciting one. I think the last couple of years, there's been an explosion in logistics innovation around getting products to customers when, where, and how they want them, whether it's, you know, same day delivery or just picking a time for delivery, which Europe has had for a long time in other markets, but the US has lagged on, or curbside pickup, or self-checkout. So I think, you know, the ability to get a product into a customer's hand has gone through a tremendous amount of innovation that I think is really exciting and really empowering for the end consumer.
And I know Matt's also a little bit passionate about the arena. So Matt, why don't you share with us a little bit about your thoughts here?
Yeah, I was just thinking about outside of what Michael mentioned. For me, one of the biggest shifts over the course of the past year and a half has been the integration of the buy button into the social space. There was for so long a really like very, very tall and wide wall between the social space and the commerce space. And no matter how hard retailers tried to break through that wall, the consumer wasn't having it. And recently, like very, very recently, we've seen a very, very swift shift where consumers are not only willing to engage from a commercial perspective in the social space, but actually expect it. And, you know, so for me, this is because there was this, retailers tried so hard to force themselves into that space for so long and kept getting the pushback. A lot of folks finally said, all right, I get it. You don't want me there. And now we're at a moment where the customer's saying, no, come on in. Like, we're ready for you. And so that's a huge shift for me. And one that, you know, we go back to organizational inertia and kind of scar tissue that we got to kind of break through. It's meaningful. And then the emergence of platforms that are, you know, they come and go so fast and they rise to a level of consciousness that we could never have actually expected or anticipated. You know, it's such a fast space. TikTok being the one that's most prescient for, you know, for us right now. You know, how do you engage in that space authentically? It's a meaningful thing. Sorry, that's Steve. It's the biggest shapeshifter for me right now.
I think, you know, one more really interesting trend happening on the consumer front right now is actually re-commerce, right? You know, as consumers, especially the next generation, the millennials and Gen Zs, are definitely have, you know, they're very much aware of the planet, how sustainable our consumer behavior is, right? And now that behavior change has a major impact on how commerce is done. In terms of, you know, let's just say we're buying new products. We're a lot more thoughtful in terms of what we buy, right? We don't need 6 different versions of the same dress. We don't need 10 pairs of different jeans in the closet, right? So we're buying less. Hopefully we're buying better. So I think retailers and brands have to think about, for the products they're offering, are they relevant to this new consumer behavior and new consumer trend? The other aspect that it is having an impact on commerce is for the stuff that we have in our wardrobe, what do we do? Do we just give them to Goodwill? Do we throw them out? That is a very different, it was never really a thing, right? You know, 5 years ago, we don't think twice. At the end of the year, we have 5 bags we take to Goodwill. Now we think twice. How do we, you know, are we able to make new space in the wardrobe? Can we pass it on? Can we do peer-to-peer selling? Can we sell it to, you know, the Real or somebody else, the ThreadUp? So other consumers who might be interested in the style or who might not have the resources for, you know, a full price Chanel jacket actually are able to actually have access to the products, right? So I think that is having a major impact on the planet for sure. Definitely a big impact on how we spend our money, the consumption of our thoughts and the consumption of our wallet. I think that is something as retailers and brands we have to really think about. And as investors, we're definitely thinking about, you know, new technologies and new platforms and new supply chain that is able to enable that new commerce trend.
Or we might not even buy it in the first place. We might just rent it, right? We're going to rent clothes.
Absolutely.
We're going to rent furniture. Janie, we're going to rent that picture behind you, you know, and when we decide we don't like it anymore, we're going to get the one that's behind Matt and and not even buy things anymore. But, and I'll add one more, which is, I'll call it experiential commerce. You know, we talk a lot about that, and boy, is this, you know, is the coronavirus going to change what we mean by experiential? But I actually think that this may emphasize our need to get back together, to have shopping centers, to have malls, to have, you know, store events and things going on in the store. And I think that maybe I'll even go as far as to say, like, this is not the death of the mall. It's actually the resurgence of the mall as a meeting place, as a community center, as a eat and entertain and get together and be human again together.
That's a great way to end. Thank you so much. We're at the 11 o'clock mark. So we're closing out. Thank you so much to our panelists, Bernadine, Michael, Janie, Matt. Thanks for joining us. A recording will be available. Stay healthy, stay safe. Take care, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.